let's move on to our final thing, Anders. It's weird how these things happen, that a completely random selection of films ends up having like crossovers with actors and sometimes themes and things. This time we have Carey Mulligan again and Adam Brody again, and it's Promising Young Woman.
You wait all day for Carey Mulligan and Adam Brody to come along, and all of a sudden two of them show up at once. Isn't it just typical? Yes. Promising Young Woman, in which Carey Mulligan's Cassie Thomas leads an unconventional life, a disillusioned coffee shop worker by day and a to-catch-a-predator honey trap by night. Masquerading as hopelessly drunk, she allows Ohio's selection of nice guys to help her get home, whereupon they invariably attempt to parley that into date rape, at which point she can spring a gotcha, although I feel there ought to be some further step involved beyond pointing out the hypocrisy and piecing out. Seems like a dangerous hobby without any other payoff. But why do this? Well, glad you asked. Turns out it's largely a response to the sexual assault suffered by our friend Nina when they were at med school, the trauma from which caused Nina to drop out, and Cassie to follow suit to care for her. Although she did eventually commit suicide after this crime was not taken seriously and brushed under the carpet. This all resurfaces when an old med school friend, Bo Burnham's Ryan Cooper, walks into the coffee shop and a relationship begins. However, when Cassie realises that one of the perpetrators of Nina's gang rape is about to get married, she hatches a scheme for revenge. Now, I found Promising Young Woman to be an uncomfortable and not particularly rewarding watch, not just because of the subject matter. My main problem was an inconsistent tone, and I'm not sure whether that's by design or accident. It bounces around between dark comedy, straight drama and slasher flick so often that the whiplash very much detracts from the film. Similarly, the lauded performance of Mulligan, which I'm also not sure if I can decide whether is really great, subtle piece of work, or a piece of something else entirely. While she's being, well, normal human being in the relationship with Ryan, she seems, well, human, but I'm not convinced at all by her turn as a nihilistic wage slave or as a cunning femme fatale. And all that puts me rather off balance, which I suppose is the point of the film, but I'm not sure it's getting there through its intended route. I don't dislike the general concept of the film, though, and there's a good modern update on the grindhouse genre staple in here somewhere, but for my money, not quite in this iteration. Ultimately, it's not something I'd recommend, although I'm sure a lot of people will get much more out of it than I did. It actually took me a couple of goes to watch this. I had to watch it in shifts. I don't know how much of it is just... I really wasn't buying Carey Mulligan's performance in this. Particularly at the start, I found that quite almost unwatchable, which is odd because I like Carey Mulligan generally, but I just was not buying her as a human being in this film, and that made it quite tough to watch through. I don't know, maybe if I'd managed to actually knuckle down and watch all of this in one go, it might have hung together a bit better for me. But yeah, I found it a bit of a slog to get through. I can't recommend it. Sorry.
I can, but it comes with a lot of caveats. I clearly got a lot more from it than you, Scott, but there is the tonal problem, and I think how you respond, it comes down to how you read it. And I read it, which I think is the way it's meant to be, but I can really very easily see how other people would not feel this way, is that as well as being a pastiche of kind of more exploitative rape revenge films, it is kind of taking the piss out of your anywhere from like 1990s to 2010s romantic comedies, particularly that kind of middle section before it gets really dark again.
Yeah.
And so, like the couple are dancing carefree in a pharmacy, and it doesn't fit with the before and after of it at all. But it's kind of taking the piss out of that. It's a pastiche of that, a mockery more than anything, actually. However, while I was aware of that, and it didn't particularly bother me, still thinking it's so different from the tone of the rest of the film that it doesn't quite work. Especially given that how that section ends with a revelation. I'm really hoping that wasn't meant to be a shock, because it was very obvious. Like, how it was delivered, you could really guess, I think. But given that we know the general time frame and who was involved with various things, like that revelation with that main character was the... I'm going to say spoilers here because this is going to be very difficult to talk about without that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, yeah, if you've not seen Promising Young Woman but you're interested, stop listening now because we're going to talk about the end. So you have been warned. Yeah, when you find out that Ryan was involved, that's not a shock. That was clearly coming because you knew he was involved with those people back in the medical school days. So it's not the first time. I find myself second guessing the director's intent and wondering whether, like, I'm reading it wrong or something. Like, is that supposed to be a shock? And I don't think it is. I think it's just meant to be the bit that turns her back. She's fooled into thinking things are okay and aren't.
Yeah. I don't think I took it as it being necessarily a shock as such. It was within the boundaries of what was there. But from what you kind of learn of this guy's character, as he's kind of presented in the modern context, I can see why the character may not have expected the previous version of him to be part of that whole sexual abuse scene. Mm-hmm. So I suppose I can see it from that context. But yeah, I mean, in terms of viewing it as an audience, yeah, obviously it makes a lot of sense that he would be involved in it in some way because it's the defining thing that this film's built around, and he's the only other character. Well, not the only other character, but the only other main character that is around in that time. So seems likely he would have been involved in it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and again, exactly.
Concentration of characters and all that, you know.
And all of the villains in the piece, he knew them, was friends with them. And, but that kind of, so this means she's not, Carey Mulligan's character is not the person that was assaulted, but she seems to be as affected by this as anybody else, or by Nina, who it's never clearly stated she killed herself. I think it's heavily implied, but never stated. But it could be anything else. It could be like
it's not explicit, but it's pretty clear from the context of everything and their parents saying that. I didn't think it was.
Certainly, the trauma of it caused. I mean, it could have been something like depression led to not eating or something, and it's not quite the same as suicide, but results are the same, the cause is the same. So, I'm not going to get into that. But then, so the film takes this turn. So it's while, as I say, I think it's trying to kind of mock those kind of sappy, like late 90s, early 2000s romantic comedies. Because that's quite a long section of the film, tonally feels so different from the rest of it, and it doesn't quite fit.
Yeah.
But so we get to the next section. She starts like going back on the revenge path, and I still quite enjoyed her journey and see what she was doing, and I quite like the subversion of expectations. Like, she turns up to Alfred Molina's house and she's all ready to get him punished, and like, oh wait, maybe other people have had thoughts about things too. And like, I really like that, actually. So there are some really nice things in there, and it's like, it's not just your straight up revenge drama or anything like that. And I found Carey Mulligan's performance pretty good. I think it's not hugely well thought out in terms of what she's doing. As you said, this is not always going to end well. And people who are prepared to rape an unconscious woman might be prepared to do it with a conscious woman, and they're not going to necessarily stop just because she said, hello, look, I'm not drunk. And also, I can't take McLovin seriously in anything when he's not basically McLovin.
Yeah.
But the biggest problem I had with the film is the ending. And like, in one way, it's kind of satisfying that justice is done-ish. But, and also, I kind of like the fact you think when she goes to this bachelor party at the end, you kind of feel like you know how it's going to go. And it very shockingly does not go that way at all.
I kind of like that on some level, but as an actual audience member, I'm not sure I did, on the basis that it's just such that, and the scenes that follow it, where it's kind of twisted a little bit in terms of how the outcome kind of plays out, doesn't make any sense at all.
That's my big problem. That's what I'm coming to. Yeah. So like, what happens to her when she gets killed? They're like, oh, I did not expect that. And it ties in quite well with, like, you know, like, these things don't end well. Mm-hmm. And had this been a romantic comedy and like that Ryan had done this terrible thing, and then like, I love you, and don't you still love me? And she just kind of looks at him like, no, because in the real life, no, you've been insane. And that happens at the end. And like, okay, that didn't go how I expected, but like, she had the the video, I assume she sent that to the police, or she had some way, and that would be okay. But it kind of gets stupid at the end, and it really offended me how stupid it was, because is the suggestion that she knew she was going to die, and that somehow she knew that her body would be disposed of, and that somebody would help him, and also Max Greenfield.
And she knew that the police would be happy enough to show up when it would be dramatically convenient for the film to end.
Yeah, and also that knowing that she was going to cause trouble at the bachelor party, that Ryan would still have turned up at the wedding. I thought he'd probably want to avoid that. And like, why would she send that thing to Alfred Molina? Because she's assuming he's actually honest in his contrition, but she doesn't know him. Rather than just send it to the police. It's like, it's because you want like this kind of satisfying ending where you can like think, well, this terrible things happen, but yes, we've got the villains of the piece. Like, yeah, but it's all kind of stupid.
Yeah, there's a lot of film shortcuts that are taken at the end of it, which in and of themselves are fine because it's a film, but it kind of undercuts itself just by being so obviously it being artifacts of a film and being written as a film rather than something where you're trying to actually invest any proper emotion into, which I would argue is something that is trying to be a vaguely realistic take on a rape revenge, modern twist of that. It demands a somewhat better, a somewhat higher production value than what actually it gets, which is basically the kind of same low concept, low thought nonsense that you would find in grindhouse films all the day. And I, again, that's what I get to. I can't quite decide whether this film's really, really clever or really, really stupid. It's one or either of the both. It's possibly both of them simultaneously.
For the most part of the film, I err towards the clever. It's clearly got an important topic at its heart. It has a lot to say, and it's saying it strongly, and it's not coincidental that it's written and directed by a woman. And I think it's part of its problem is it's not that it's stupid, that it's not clever enough in its writing. Like the scene, I really like the scene with Connie Britton as the dean of the university.
Yeah, that's good.
And it's like she's put her daughter in danger, or made her think that, and then she's talking about like basically she gets so many reports of rape on campus that she's getting 2 a week. Yeah. Like, I think, should you not be worried? Should I not be setting alarm bells ringing? And it's like saying, like, all these structures are in place that are not responsive to that. They're not flexible. And there's a really important message. And that whole scene is really, really well done. Because you're always like slightly on edge wondering, is there a point where Cassandra goes too far? Yeah. Like puts someone else in danger, and like she's kind of become the villain at that point. It never happens, and it's great. But then, that whole ending is it's so stupid because it's relying on ridiculous coincidences, which I never care for in any film of any description at all.
It's just contrived.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate.
It's kind of
in a film where all the other acts have been quite well laid out for the most part. It just, again, another film that just doesn't quite stick the landing.
Yeah, it kind of rushes to a conclusion there. And yet the rest of it, because she kind of planned out the thing with Alison Brie's character and like just to basically mess with her, saying like, here's what it's like, and it's a kind of revenge, but never actually do anything bad. But everything that happens there, it's believable enough. Yeah, she like, even the fact she drinks so much, it's like she probably knows the person quite well and kind of knows how to kind of nudge her in that direction. And then that ending, it's really? That's just too stupid. It's like, I would have been quite satisfied if like things do not go for plan and not to plan for at the bachelor party, but she'd set up something like, should it go tits up, the police informed of the other thing, and like there should be plenty of evidence in that tape, if not to get a conviction, at least to ruin his career. Yeah, which would be something much more than nothing that had happened before. But for it to be basically relying on all those coincidences at the end and all the timing to match exactly how she wanted it to go, no, that's disappointing. On the whole, I really enjoyed it. It's not something I think I'd ever watch again. I think I've got everything I could get out of it in one view. The only other minor quibbles I have are one minor quibble with the casting is that Max Greenfield has no business being in this film. He completely changed the tone of it just by existing in it. He's the friend of the groom who helps him burn the body. Scott, if you're not aware of who that is, it's such a kind of goofy face, and he's normally in comedy stuff, and he sticks out like a sore thumb here. But
I kind of let away with that because you've already cast McLovin earlier in the film.
yes,
so,
there is that. Yes, and as I said, I did have my issues with that as well. Although less significant role that McLovin's playing. It is nice to see Clancy Brown not play an evil person.
Yes, that was unusual. Yeah.
Clancy Brown smiling. Does he smile? Have I seen that before? I'm not sure. So that's nice, but yes, there are problems with like the tone and stuff, and it's really funny in points, and I was enjoying it. I really like Carey Mulligan. That the middle portion with the kind of romantic comedy threatens to completely throw it off course, and I think it's deliberate. So believing that it worked for me, and I could see very easily how that wouldn't. But the ending, it's too stupid.
Yeah, I mean, it is, but in a volte-face from what I've said earlier, the fact that we both managed to find so much to discuss in there probably means that it's worth giving it a go. So, yeah, give it a go. I rescind my earlier not recommending it to giving it a recommendation. So, yes, watch it and discuss with us. Yes.